Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McKusick, and it's time for this week's Friday Morning GM with my co-host, Vas Laricos. Vas, how you doing?
I'm doing okay, Ken. Been a tough season for the Ravens. That Thanksgiving loss was pretty brutal. Have not had much success in prime time, but we're hoping they can turn it around this week. The first rivalry game of the season against Pittsburgh. And it does not feel like a typical rivalry week. It seems like the end of an era, and maybe in some regards. I'm not sure. There's been talk in the national media that Tomlin and or Harbaugh may have some job security questions. And the league has really changed since these two gentlemen had their first match up in 2008. So, we'll see. Might be the last one in Baltimore with these two coaches facing each other.
It could be. That's certainly possible. Harbaugh is signed for longer. I don't know Tomlin's situation. I think he might be signed for another year or two as well. But there's talk. The Steelers fans are talking about trading Tomlin. They think he has value. Not to them. They don't want him to be the coach of the Steelers, but they think they can trade him. So
the Giants.
Yeah. And they might be right. It's supposedly not a very good coaching pool this year. I never really believe that. I think generally people don't know who the good coaching or who the well thought of coordinators and assistant coaches are.
There's a couple that I caught my eye in both legacies. Clint Kubiak, who's Seattle's offensive coordinator, who's been doing really well with Darnold. And the other one is LaFleur's brother, who's the offensive coordinator underneath McVay for the Rams. The last 6 Super Bowl winning coaches have all been offensive coordinators previously. And 9 of the 12 teams that have 8+ wins currently all have offensive coordinators. So it seems like the league's going that direction.
All right. There's certainly a lot of the opportunity going that direction. We had some offensive line changes this week. Maybe we talk about just as a quick look back, and then we're going to have a lot of look forward stuff in terms of, unfortunately, some bad injury news. But offensive line changes this week. The big thing that Emory Jones got his first opportunity. By the way, for folks out there, if you don't want to look like an idiot, Emery, not Emory. Like
Right.
an Emory board is wrong, and Emory is what it is. Emery.
Yeah, so 16 snap debut, I believe it was, and he obviously was injured before the draft. Some believe that's why he slipped a little bit, but obviously he couldn't play for a while. Got onto the field, and his opportunity was given at left guard, which was a little bit eyebrow-raising to me because he played right tackle in college. You would figure the footwork would be a little bit more similar, but John Harbaugh has had complete support for Daniel Falele, and Harbaugh said he's probably not going to be able to audition at both sides, but he may be in the competition at right guard next year.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that he came out and directly said that, because it's not the kind of thing he would typically say. But he said it would be asking too much of Jones to try and produce at both positions. So Ravens have made this move and not one for Daniel Falele. And you can complain about either position, and it's somewhat legitimate. Neither player is at the replacement level. I know that everybody thinks that, and you could not be more wrong. If you look at Falele in particular, he's in the 30th percentile or something of guards. It's not a good place to be, 35th percentile maybe, but it's not the bottom of the pile either. And that's where the hope that he'd be better than that.
The reason why I think we noted this a couple weeks back, but Falele is unrestricted free agent after this year. You still have 2 more years of runway with Voorhees, so you don't want to necessarily demote him to be a backup at this point. When maybe there's a chance that Voorhees could rotate at right guard. That hasn't been eliminated.
I guess not. We haven't really seen Voorhees. He's not the typical body type you expect of a right guard.
Sure.
Either guard position, I want a kind of a squatty, gourd shaped man more. I want a thick lower body, lower glutes. Voorhees more be like an offensive tackle. He's an apple. Carries his weight around his stomach instead of in his thighs and rear end. So
yeah, Ben Grubbs like. All those first-round guards always have that same build, including the one that's on the practice squad now for the Ravens, who hasn't been promoted either yet.
That's Kenyon Drake, right? Or Kenyon
Green.
Green, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, we'll see what happens from there. I don't think there's a lot of point in speculating about it at this point, but I really dislike the accusations that get thrown out every time Falele's name gets tossed out there. It's annoying.
So uh, Emory Jones put something out on his social media that led me to believe he's expecting a larger role this coming week, whether that's a 50-50 rotation or perhaps even, taking over as a starter.
I
I
didn't
don't, I
see
wouldn't
this.
rule that out.
What was it?
He just said something like it's been a long journey and you're going to, one of those inspirational type things. I don't have it in front of me. I don't recall exactly what it was,
Okay.
but it was one of those kind of read between the tea leaves. He's probably going to be able to, or he's expecting a larger role this week, at least I would say.
All right, well, let's see what that is. In what you just said, it sounds like more like he's congratulating himself for finally getting his first NFL experience, which is also good and
Yeah,
true.
sure, absolutely.
Let's talk the injury report.
Yes, absolutely. So a little bit of a concerning injury report here. I have limited on Thursday was Rashad Bateman with an ankle after full on Wednesday. Lamar Jackson did not practice on Thursday after limited on Wednesday. Travis Jones apparently has not participated this week, what's being deemed as a personal reason. Devontae Walker is limited with a groin on Thursday after full on Wednesday. Nate Wiggins is limited both days with a foot injury that knocked him out of the game on Thanksgiving. And then two injury reserve players that have been activated, Tavius Robinson and Ardarius Washington, are both limited both 2 days.
Okay, so both Robinson and Washington both returned to practice in the 21-day window. So it's exciting news. They each have to be activated to the 53-man roster, not necessarily the game day roster, obviously, in time for the Packers game. And it was interesting. Harbaugh's comment yesterday seemed to indicate that Washington was the closer of the two players, that he had a chance to play this week.
Very surprising. He tore his Achilles in March, I think it was, or April. I think they changed the surgery where they do it differently for an Achilles nowadays. Tightrope, I believe it's called, and maybe that speeds up process. But I would expect. I thought Robinson might be ready to go this week. 4 weeks out with a foot, so we'll see.
Okay. Well, anyway, we'll have to wait on that, and obviously, them not. I wouldn't necessarily expect them to make progress. They could well be limited full in the week that they participate. But my guess is it's going to be a full on Wednesday in the week that they're ready to go. That would be my guess. The setback for Lamar Jackson obviously is the biggest news on the entire injury report. I don't know that we have good information from anybody on that, and the coordinators were at the podium today, so they're not even allowed to talk about injuries. It's a very strict mandate that Harbaugh has.
Yeah, apparently Todd Bunkin may have let the cat out of the bag there by saying that he does expect Lamar to play, and he just says he's been battling through it all year, the injury, the undisclosed, apparently moving target injury, and it is what it is. I mean, it's been a tough year for Lamar, and you hope he can get back healthy at some point, but missing practice and being limited in practice after a mini bye is not a good sign.
Yeah, I mean, I see this and a setback on the second day of practice. I mean, it could be a new injury. It could be an injury where there is no real hope of it getting better before the end of the season. If it's been this kind of a thing, either one. I mean, an injury where there's no real hope of it getting better, obviously is going to torpedo the Ravens season. I don't see them competing for a Super Bowl with Lamar not just playing like he is, but moving like he is. Because I think he could play better moving the way he is. But I don't see, without the misdirection component of the Ravens' run game available to them, I don't see how they compete at playoff time for the Super Bowl.
Yep, I would agree. You definitely need your stars to shine their brightest in the postseason. There's no question about that.
Good news on Wiggins, I guess, to be limited for the first 2 days after what seemed like it could be a pretty serious injury the way he hobbled off the field on Thursday.
Yeah, agreed. Anytime a player exits the game, there's definitely a risk of them missing time in the future. 2 limiteds doesn't inspire a ton of confidence. You'd like to see a full practice on Friday. If not, you're probably looking at Marlin on the outside primarily and using a little more Martin with TJ Tampa as your backup and maybe Amani Oruwariye serving as the special teams elevation / emergency cornerback.
Yeah, that could be. Martin and Tampa are both honestly pretty damn good backup options in December in the NFL. That's what I would point to here is that most NFL teams don't have anything that good there, and Martin is perfectly reasonable to go in at slot corner on dime snaps, which would be that's the big thing that is open up. Whether you move Humphrey to slot on dime or whether you put Martin in at dime with Hamilton moving to the will. With the way Martin played recently in 2 consecutive games, I would go with Martin at this point. I hope the Ravens will. I certainly expect him to be active, but where are you on that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think Martin is, as well as Arthur Millette, is a example that the Ravens are very adept at finding quality slot nickel men, and they don't need to invest a lot of resources there moving forward because they're good at it. You have to lean into your advantages. The question would be potentially is Tampa better than Humphrey on the outside? Because Humphrey's obviously having a down year, and Humphrey does probably fare a little bit better. If you had to say where's Humphrey's best position now, I would say it is in the slot. But yeah, I'd be more than happy to do Martin. Maybe Washington is activated and he gets in the mix too. And I'd like to see Washington compete for Alohi Gilman snaps at some point because I think they need to decide which two they want to make re-sign for next year.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think only one of those will be signed. Anything else from the injury report that we're missing? Obviously, disappointing on Bateman and Walker to take a step back on a Thursday. Just awful news.
Yeah, receiver depth has been a strength all season. You did have Tylan Wallace who on the shelf last week on the sideline, healthy scratch. So I think we'll be okay. We should touch on the 2 players that were placed on injured reserve that we didn't talk about last week because we didn't record with the Thursday Thanksgiving game. Taven Bryant and Justice Hill both been moved to injured reserve. I believe Justice Hill is expected back potentially at some point this season. And the Ravens have not filled those 2 roster spots. So you wonder, are they earmarked for Robinson or Darius Washington, or could someone else be promoted from the practice squad?
Yeah, good point. So Robinson, Washington would be very reasonable possibilities for that. And then they'd be going with 3 running backs, which we've been kind of leaning into the whole year. I have to say, really happy with the play of Rasheen Ali on Thanksgiving night. He had a really good game blocking. It's not a big sample size. It was like 3 sets and 5 chips as we scored it, but everyone was a solid block, and I'm just very happy to see a game like that.
Yeah, he could probably take Justice Hill's job and take that, what is it, about $3.5 million of cap savings. I did actually have a question I wanted to pose to you about that because a lot of people were asking me on Twitter, why was Rasheen Ali have so many snaps? And I said, obviously, It's because there was a passing game script and he's the best pass blocker, and that's fine. Who makes those decisions? The substitution pattern is that Willie Taggart, the position coach?
Oh no, no. It'd be Monken in terms of the install and what's going on. I don't think Taggart, unless there's something involving an injury where Taggart is reporting it to Monken, and Monken then has to adapt and understand what play is going on.
The 2 positions you see it a lot are defensive front, outside backers, and defensive linemen, as well as running backs and receivers to some extent. That's all predetermined week because sometimes the running back gets 3 carries in a row and he gets winded, and then they put the other running back in for a change of pace.
Yeah, absolutely. Taggart could have input into that, being on the headset, talking to Monken and telling him, "Hey, Mitchell isn't ready to go this play, or Henry isn't ready to go this play. We got to use somebody else." I'm not saying that that's not happening, but I thought your question was who decides who's in for like a passing package, and that's obviously Monken in terms of understanding who his best blocking back is.
Just a little inside baseball that I personally was unsure of, and I think I know more than most, so I was just curious.
All right, fair enough. And I did a video on why Ali got a lot of the snaps, and it basically comes down to he really had a good game, and so he reinforced the desire of the Ravens coaches to keep him in there and playing well.
Yeah, I don't buy they had to run more, they didn't run more, and that's why they lost the game. It's game script. People just don't take account game script. They look at the box score at the end of the game and say, well,
Right.
look at this, point out this. That's not how football works. You have to
Yeah.
look at the individual drives and 2-minute drills and everything else.
Yeah, and look at the plays and really say which plays should have been reversed. It's kind of like people saying we need to cut defense spending. And one of the presidents, I forget, it might have been H.W. Bush, said, tell me which bases you want to close. Specifically, which bases, which units are we cutting? And then nobody wants to give that answer,
Right.
of course. And so
Right.
but yeah,
Uh,
if I think he only played one first down the whole game that was a possible run situation, by the way.
okay. Yeah, that makes sense. It was just because Henry was on the sideline for the whole second quarter. And was that because it's Thursday night, short week? That was the
Don't
only
know.
thing. But it is what it is. It'd be nice if Derrick Henry maybe could do a little bit better pass blocking too and take some of those snaps so it's not so predictable. But anyway, unless you had a thought to that.
No, let's say Chandler Martin we need to talk about also
Yep.
this week. Yeah.
Yeah, Chandler Martin, injured reserve with an ACL. He's now the second inside backer to suffer an ACL on special teams along with Jay Higgins. I guess those two will be competing next year for something. So the question remains now, are the Ravens going to go find another inside backer to elevate for special teams? And they did sign one to the practice squad this week, William Quenco, as well as running back Jonathan Ward. It does seem like they want that body type, that 6 foot, 230, I guess, 240. That's a piece that they've been wanting to have on their special teams units throughout the year. Could they elevate an outside linebacker instead? Maybe that has a similar build, but it does seem like that's the body type they want.
Yeah, it could be that or a tight end are the three positions you can be if you're a big on special teams. So yeah, they needed one more of that type. So I would expect Quenco would be elevated this week. All right. So what else? I think we've talked through most of the stuff in terms of how they deal with injuries. Obviously, the most significant is what they do if Jackson for some reason can't go. I honestly this game, it's in a lot of ways it's the whole season for the Ravens. The leverage on it for both teams is about 50% in terms of not making the playoffs versus making the playoffs. I can't imagine that the Ravens are not going to beg Jackson to try and play.
Yeah, I think Lamar's going to play, and to that point, it's 70% that the Ravens will make the playoffs if they win, 20-some% if they lose, and basically the exact same thing for the Steelers. I think it's a little bit higher just because they have the home game remaining. SIS put out a impact. Who's been the most impacted by injury? So they tallied up who's been injured, and then I guess put some sort of weight to that. And the Ravens were 16th, which is middle of the pack. So they haven't been decimated in terms of numbers, but to have your franchise quarterback hobbling through a month
Yeah,
here,
that's probably not accurately reflected for a quarterback who's on the field.
right.
So if he's, and I think I'd like to understand their methodology, but if he's on the injury report and obviously he's not playing well, that's a pretty significant factor. And he's won the last 2 MVP awards. DEI BS aside,
Right.
he's the league's best player in terms of expected value, and he hasn't been there this year due to a whole slew of injuries.
Yep. So we did have some interesting activation choices last week that we should touch on. And let's start with Carl Lawson, got his first debut against his former team. And David Ojabo was not activated for the last game against the Bengals.
Yeah, interesting that they picked this game, and it's one of 3 for Lawson, so they could do it again. I don't think they're getting very much from David Ojabo, and I don't expect him to be back. I don't think there's a reason why the Ravens would go with him. It's unfortunate that they kind of felt like they wanted to stay with him this year. They've had other options on the practice squad. Unfortunately, they really haven't had the other option to replace Tavius Robinson snaps. And so they were trying to get some of that from Ojabo. Didn't work out. Lawson is just another situational pass rusher, which really gives them 4 of them at the outside linebacker position. So that's why it's so cool that Tavius might be back in a couple of weeks. But yeah, they still don't have that as of right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, I don't want to get too enamored with Tavius because he's maybe their best three down outside backer,
Mhm.
but he still doesn't grade terrifically either as a pass rusher or a run defender on PFF for what it's worth.
Okay.
So I think that should be a need, a definite need going into the draft.
Yeah, I'm not saying no to that, by the way, but that it won't be a need. But I don't really agree entirely with Tavius's grading on PFF as far as he as a run defender. He's outstanding at basically every single peripheral element of being an outside linebacker, and he has terrific versatility. Stops are terrific relative to missed tackles. Missed tackle rate is very low. His coverage is actually fairly decent for an outside linebacker, and he can kick inside and be a guy who you can use in that way. I mean, if we look at this week and the possibility, I don't know what the situation is with um, Travis Jones, but if he for some reason can't go this week, I mean, they're going to be looking for any way they can to fix it, and that might mean a race car package that they'd use on third down. They would really love to have a player like Tavius Robinson for that. He's a very natural inside guy.
Sure. So the other two offensive line decisions. So Emory Jones was activated, which meant Ben Cleveland was deactivated, which I believe was for the first time this season. And the other one at offensive tackle after 2 weeks of Carson Vincent over Joe Noteboom. I believe Noteboom's been above Vincent now for at least 1 week, if not two in a row.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it appears that decision got reversed again. I wish I understood exactly what was going on with some of the Ravens' offensive line choices. That to me, it's kind of a weird one. I don't know why you go one way, then you go the other. There's no injury designations for either player, so it's kind of strange from that perspective. So could have been something as simple as poor technique on a field goal unit.
To me, the most logical, and this is speculation, but they just want to split the baby. We're going to put the young guy in with no experience, so let's put the veteran in, and then vice versa the next time. So at least they have somebody. If you hit doomsday scenario on the offensive line and you're replacing three guys, at least you have a known commodity. They're not all three unknowns. Would be my theory.
I'm sorry. Explain that again. You're
so
saying
they don't want to have both Emory Jones and Carson Vincent active the same time, along with Bullock, with all three of them a very limited experience. So do you want to have either Cleveland or Noteboom along with two of those, so they're not completely green if they had to go to all three?
Okay, could be. And then Cleveland, in theory, they've talked about it a lot. I don't know if he's ever played in a regular season game, but Cleveland theoretically could play right tackle if needed.
Yeah.
But that rings kind of hollow when they'll never put him in at right guard. But
yeah. Well, it's mysterious for sure. The last interesting choice was Devontae Walker over Tylan Wallace. I was excited when I saw this. I said, that's what they need. They need Tez Walker. He's got that big playability. And then obviously he had a poor game. But Tylan Wallace's first deactivation of the game too, of the season.
So first of all, you've been calling for this, I know. So that's something that is worth noting. I don't think Walker did anything wrong in this game that I would point to that said he didn't deserve more playing time. He was open twice. Lamar missed him twice. The missing him in stride on the bomb is kind of like right down the numbers. He had about an 8-yard window to hit that throw. And if that throws anywhere in that, Walker will run under it. But he had to slow down to try and catch the ball. Dax Hill, it was stacked, was well behind, got in, got his hand in, and pried the ball free as it went to the ground. It was a very unfortunate circumstance. The other one, he was open and Stone had fallen down. Mm-hmm. I don't know if Stone had fallen down in time for Lamar to factor that into his throw, but he whistled the ball high. Would have been a very, very tough catch for Walker, but I like the fact that he was open and was back there. I don't think there's anything about going 0 for 2 on those two particular targets that says he doesn't deserve more. Yeah.
Well, that makes me feel better about it because I thought that maybe he could have done a little bit more, but I didn't maybe spend as much time with the all-22 as you did. Lamar had a tough game. There's no sugarcoating. He had a bad game. Mm-hmm. I think that's the worst Lamar has looked from a passing perspective since his rookie season. And I'm a Lamar supporter and Lamar defender, but it is what it is.
Yeah, we went over the 10 throws he missed with ball out quick or ATS. in
Wow.
that game. And that's an unbelievable number for one game, for particularly for Lamar, who's very accurate.
Mhm.
But he missed a bunch of ball at quicks, and with ATS, the numbers were astounding. He had 6 incompletion. There were 8 total ATS opportunities. 6 of them went incomplete. One of them was complete for 43 plus a fumble by Likely.
Mhm.
And the other one was a sack fumble of his own where he lost the ball out of his hand, which
Right.
it was an incomplete pass, but the officials miscategorized it.
Yeah, there was, and Say Flowers should have got away with that too, but it's water under the bridge. Got to look forward. Anyway, speaking of looking forward, Mark Andrews in-season contract extension. Top line thoughts, Ken?
I'm disappointed at what it probably means in terms of Isaiah Likely. I think Isaiah Likely will not be signed at this point, and it probably means the Ravens and Isaiah Likely were never really that close. We heard about Linderbaum and the Ravens not being close, and that's been kind of spoken publicly, but we haven't heard that about a Likely. They'd made him an offer before. Maybe they took that offer off the table. But Andrews isn't having a particularly good year. In fact, he's having a particularly pretty crappy year. He's at 6.4 yards per target, is by far his career low.
Yep.
And I don't like it. I mean, I don't like the signing, honestly. And some of this is forced by the position they let themselves get into, where they had 4 stacked contracts at the 3 tight ends and the fullback position. I don't know that Ricard plays into that too much, but the 3 tight ends were all stacked contracts. Just a bad position to be in.
Yeah, so I got a couple notes on this one. First of all, when the season started, I was in favor of signing Likely. He was one of my top 2 with Travis Jones. I think we were in agreement there.
Mm-hmm.
He did not, he got hurt. He didn't have the great season. He had the fumble. I was, for the last few weeks, I've been thinking re-signing Mark Andrews would have been a good alternative, a good option, but not for that number. I think that's too expensive for Mark. As you said, 6.4.
What were you expecting to be? You heard
9, 8 or 9. No, I didn't hear. This is just, but I think he should have been. I think 3 years for $8 or $9 million a year is about what I think it should have been. Not 13. I mean, he's top 5 still. So 6.4 yards per target. It's 8.6 is his average for his career. 2.3 yards of yak per reception. 3.9 is his average for his career. He's only broken 1 tackle all season. He's had 3 drops. And the postseason is really where he struggled. 5.9 yards per attempt in his career in the postseason, 0 touchdowns, and a 19.6% drop rate. So he's just not a clutch player. He hasn't been proven to be a clutch player. And I know the contracts were stacked, but to me, that's not a reason why you have to sign one of them, potentially overpay for one of them in December. You could have waited. Maybe this is the position you moneyball next year. The Ravens are great at drafting mid-round tight ends. I think almost 30% of the league's starting tight ends are expected to be free agents. You didn't have to re-sign one of the guys you had. You never have to do anything. You make your own decisions. You make your own way.
It could have been just Kolar was the one guy they bring back too. That would have been an option. My guess is it probably says something about the Kolar gap also, that he's probably he thinks he's worth a little bit more than the Ravens do. He and his agent. So
then to me, this would have been the position where you say we drafted Pitta, Andrews, Likely, and Kolar in the mid rounds. We hit on all of them. Maybe not Kolar to the same extent, but if you can't spend everywhere. So why are you spending at the position where you're great at drafting and developing, and then leaving some other positions hanging them out to dry?
It's a valid point, and why don't we move on and talk about the likelihood of signing some of the other guys? I think we talked about Likely and Kolar, and I don't think we need to belabor that further, but I think it's unlikely either of them will be signed at this point. I think it's probably a double dip year for the Ravens at the position.
I hope not. I really hope not. I think getting away from the heavy formations is the next evolution of the offense. I think that would be helpful to the running game and helpful to Lamar, getting more guys out in the pattern and giving him more options to read the field with.
That I don't think that wouldn't mean they still don't need 3 tight ends. I mean,
but you don't need 2 high-paid tight ends, is what I mean.
Right.
You need 1 star and 1 backup, and then you don't need 3 guys that could all be a tight end 1 on the team.
I'm with you on that, and I don't even mind like a 3 and a 4, 3 and a 5, anything like that being used to find the 2 tight ends. But I think it's a double dip year in the draft anyway, in
Yeah,
terms of getting 2. Okay.
agreed. Yeah, just you don't need to now say we need to get a first round tight end so we can get back to our 12 personnel
You
package.
don't ever
Which
need a first round tight end.
I know. When I had people telling me that last night, well, Sadiq, the guy out of Oregon, yeah, they should pick him if he falls to them. I said, you're going to pay Andrews and then get another first round tight end. You can't overinvest in one position because you have to pay the piper at another position when you do that.
Yeah, there's a lot of holes to fill now, unfortunately, for next year. So Tyler Linderbaum is next. I think he's almost independent of the Andrews decision, but I think in a lot of ways they were already. It's been pretty clear there's a rift involved between these two.
I don't know what to say about this one. I think all the metrics and the logic says don't overpay for a guy that's not a great pass blocker. But then you see the Ravens, they like paying their locker room guys. They really do. Ever since 2013, those are the guys they really want to pay. So it could happen. They could overpay for him. They could overpay for him like they did with Brandon Williams. I wouldn't say it's not going to happen.
Okay, now I want to be clear about my position on this because it should and is fluid right now with regard to Linderbaum's play. Linderbaum has played a lot better in recent weeks, and it's been a cleanup of pass blocking in all but one game recently. He had one terrible game. Let me get to my notes here real quickly. There's the offensive line scoring by game. Okay, yeah. So his one terrible game was Minnesota, where he had a hand in 6 different pressure events. 4.5 pressures is what I got him scored for that game. But otherwise, he's and he did not look good against the Jets either, where he had a holding penalty, 1.5 pressures, and a penetration. So there's a variety of things. But he's had 4 A's otherwise in his last 6 games, which basically is from the start of the win streak. And he's moved up in PFF's rankings to the very middle of the pack. I think he's now 17th of 31 in terms of pass blocking scoring, which is got to keep them separate, folks. That's the rules. Don't combine your pass and run blocking scores.
Sure.
It's like lemon and milk. And your mother ever tell you that you're going to get curdled milk if you put lemon in with milk?
No, my mother wasn't much of a no, she didn't say that. Yeah. So Linderbaum, if he fares well against Pittsburgh, which is a pretty good defensive front, and they're banged up, but you don't want to pay a guy that's $20 million at 17th in pass blocking who has his worst games against the toughest front you play. That's when you want to have your anchor center dominating and helping elevate the other guys.
Yeah, I'd love to see the Ravens figure it out in terms of redefining the position to a larger body type.
Yes.
Okay. And then living with the consequences in the run game. And I don't mean put Daniel Fa'alele there, but I might mean trying a guy who's a much bigger body. Now, Bullock is that in a lot of ways, but Ben Cleveland got a shot there. Now, it's not saying it worked in terms of snaps or whatever, but Ryan Jensen was a much bigger center in terms of
former tackle.
Yeah,
he played tackle in college. I think you can make that point almost across the roster. They've gotten smaller than they used to be. They're a little bit smaller at linebacker, outside linebacker, inside linebacker. Not the defensive line. That's the one place where they're
enormous there.
Yeah. But a lot of the draft picks are smaller guys. Nate Wiggins is thin. Zay Flowers is thin. Malachi Starks isn't the biggest safety you've ever seen. So I do think that would be something to maybe take into account in the next couple drafts. Try to get a little bit bigger and impose their will better.
The first and second year players on these next 2 years of Ravens teams are going to have very, very significant roles. It's not like this year's team didn't. I mean, Starks and Green and Buchanan and Wester has a role. It's not like they don't have contributions being made from the current rookies this year. But I think the next 2 years, there's going to be a lot of picks, and it's not a year where you want to raise your hand and say, they've got too many draft picks. They need better draft picks and move up and whatnot. No, that's really not what they need. A lot of bodies on this team. They got a huge number of players leaving. This is a time when you lean into the success the Ravens have had, finding people at all rounds, and you roll the dice and you try and get some guys later in the draft who are good.
Yeah, I think aim high, aim for the home run in the later rounds, not the double. because the guy that can play special teams and maybe carve out a role is not helping you too much. I did want to make one more point on the Andrews signing before we move on. The core of the team is aging now, and they're getting a little bit older. So you have, as I see it, 8 I don't know if they're cornerstone contracts, but the biggest cap hits. So Lamar's in his prime. Kyle Hamilton's in his prime. Best contract on the team
He's
by
young.
far.
Yeah.
Justin Madubuike, who knows what his future holds?
That's a problem.
Then you have Ronnie Stanley. He's going to be 32 years old in March. He's got the 14th high. He's the 14th highest paid left tackle, PFF's 25th grade. Derrick Henry is going to be 32 in January. He's the 3rd highest paid running back with the 41st PFF grade. Mark Andrews, 31 in September, 5th highest at tight end with the 20th best tight end grade. And it applies to defense too, not quite as old, but Marlon Humphreys, 30 in July, 9th at APY at cornerback, 106th grade. And Roquan Smith, 29 in April, 2nd in APY, 11th in grade. So they're not as young as they used to be when Ronnie and Marlon were in their second cut, and we're still in their prime.
They have 3 players there probably be resolved no later than the end of the 26 season. So Ronnie Stanley, I would expect to be gone after 26 and recover $16 million, I think it is, in the final year of his deal. Either Roquan or Humphrey could be cut this year, but I would look at both of them. They've got a $7 million cap savings. I'm not sure in either case that they find a better player. I'm pretty sure in Roquan's case, they will not find a better player for $7 million. They could take a chance and, put somebody bad there. We've done that before. It hasn't worked out, multiple times. I think I'd be in favor of holding on to Roquan. In the case of Humphrey, I don't know what you do. If he's not good enough to play for the Ravens, that would be one thing. But unfortunately, the Ravens have also a shortage of younger cornerbacks, period, after Longer Beam and Kone both got hurt this last draft. So they're gonna be drafting in a lot of positions. Corner is another one where they're gonna have to find young guys to fill those positions.
Yeah, and it's tough. I'm on the other side of the coin for Roquan. I think it's okay to go cheap at inside linebacker. The best defense in the league this year. The best couple are cheap at inside backer. I don't mind letting Teddy Buchanan see what he can do. They did play pretty good against the Rams when Roquan was out. And Marlon, he's been one of my favorite players. He's my header on my social media. But if he's not getting it done, he's not getting it done. So I don't know. He's the one guy that kind of carries the torch from Ray Lewis to Ed Reed to Suggs to Marlon. I think he's the second longest tenured player on the team after Ronnie. But 106th grade, that's not good enough to be top 10 at the position.
There's various things, books written about business in terms of what you do with players who embody the team's philosophy, but they aren't star performers at their current position. And and reposition is the word that would be applied to those kind of people. If they embody your goals and your mission, you move them to a position where this can succeed. And it may be that this is time for Humphrey to move to safety. I think if we're talking about here are the two options: re-sign Ardarius or sign Gilman. It's not like either of those could be a lot cheaper. Ardarius will be somewhat cheaper, but not a lot cheaper because it's $7 million next year. You've already paid all the other crap. So it doesn't even matter what the fuck.
Some cost.
Yeah.
Some cost. Yeah.
So it's the $7 million that matters. So anyway, if he's worth it at that price and that's less than what you pay for Ardarius or Gilman, or he's better by enough, or his versatility to move back to corner if needed, then you do that. So I'd be.
Yeah, I like that idea. I'd like to keep Marlon, and I think maybe he can be a safety. He can take the Rod Woodson route. And who was the other one? Charles Woodson too, right? The Green Bay guy went to safety at the end of his career.
That's probably true. There's been lots of players who've done it. Most recently, Jalen Ramsey in Pittsburgh is doing it and being a free safety. So, yeah.
All right. Shall we hit the mailbag?
Sure thing. You gonna start us off, or you want me to?
No, I'll start us off. And this one is a continuation of the Mark Andrews discussion from Will Rubenstein. We should be extending players in their prime, not their decline. Has to be to placate Lamar and his extension, or else it makes no sense. Looking forward to you and Film Study Ravens discussing in this week's Film Study mailbag.
Okay. First of all, I don't have any issue with the general theory. I want to sign young players. I want to extend young players. I much would prefer to have Likely. And I think there are other people who said I'd rather have Likely for 2 million more kind of thing. We have no idea what the difference might have been like. It might have been 5 million. In which case I might not want either, honestly. And
Yeah,
that is another option. But if they truly are just placating Lamar with the signing, I'd be fairly upset with it unless they had a deal in place. If Lamar was going to be extended and they had a deal in place and it involved signing Andrews, okay, then it's not out of line. And also, the 13 million for 3 years is not as much out of line as the Odell Beckham 1 year at 18 million was.
agreed. So I'm not in favor of doing any decisions to placate players. They re-signed Dennis Pitta because he was Joe Flacco's security blanket, sort of similar way that Mark is for Lamar. And this was after he broke his hip the first time. They said he wasn't extended until after, and that ended up blowing up in their face and being a lot of dead money and years spent rehabbing, and then he broke it again. Lamar needs to negotiate his contract as long as he's paid well, which he obviously is, and his next contract will probably be another 10 million a year more than it is now. I just think you got to look what's the best interest of the team. That's always the perspective, whether it's coming for who you're voting for the Pro Bowl or whatever. I'm always what's in the best interest of the team succeeding.
Right. I saw that comment from you this week, and I am generally in favor of not voting in marginal Pro Bowlers early in their tenure, where it's going to cause escalators to occur.
Yeah, the 5th-year option, all that stuff,
all that crap. But Patrick Queen was one of the players. It's like there's no way in hell I'd vote for Patrick Queen to be a Pro Bowler in anything but his 4th season, where he's not getting the 5th-year option.
Right.
And anything but that. I mean, he didn't really deserve it enough in his time as a Raven. And then all you're doing is you're costing yourself money. And I know he's one of the players who's out there begging for Pro Bowl votes online.
Yeah, he's an interesting player. Interesting player for sure. You want the next one, or you want me to go?
I'll go with Will Saunders here. He says, "Hey Voss, on your next Friday morning GM show, would you please discuss what percentage you would give to Harbaugh returning if they don't make the playoffs, especially with the road to playoffs through the Bengals and the Steelers? Bisciotti watched embarrassing standalone game on Thanksgiving."
If they don't make the playoffs, it's hard to say. I'm not in Steve Bisciotti's mind. I'm going to say 25%, and I think Steve Bisciotti wants to
25% return or 25% gone.
25% return, 75% gone. Steve Bisciotti's contend every season. That's his mantra. That's how the whole organization operates. And you want to see proof of concept that you are contending every season. You don't want to go from conference championship game backwards to divisional round game backwards to out of the playoffs. And Harbaugh has been 18 years now. I think it might be time where Steve says we got to go in another direction here.
Okay, I think you're probably substituting your judgment for what Bisciotti would feel in that case. I'd say if they don't make the playoffs from this point, I mean, I think the team's already had a pretty good reversal during the year. I think we're looking at a team that is more than anything affected by the injury to Lamar, which is, it's not that's not an organizational issue in general. I'm just not sure if it's a Harbaugh issue. I have it at 55% that he returns even if they fail to make the playoffs. And there's a number of ways they can get there from this point. Obviously, if they go 0-3 against the Bengals and Steelers and doesn't really have anything to do with Lamar and there's clock management errors, that number I would have that number way down later. You should adjust to new data, but I think 55% he returns even if they don't make the playoffs right now. And I'd say about 90 if they do make the playoffs. Where are you on if they do?
If they do, and one and done, losing the wild card round?
No, we don't know. They make the playoffs. That's the only question.
Well, I mean, I think it would depend how far they go.
Okay.
If they lose in the wild card round,
if all the information, if you have to make that call on
just make the playoffs or not make
January
the playoffs.
5th of this next year. And that's the point which that decision has to be made. And you have to say, is he going to take it or not? Which way are you leaning? That's the way the question is framed here.
60. I'd say 60%. I think
Man.
Bisciotti has been extremely supportive of Harbaugh through the years, but at some point that worm turns in his mind and he says, "This we can find a better coach." So, I mean, we're trying to read Steve's mind. I don't know how else to really put it, but I think with some fan discontent, it's not a minority now. It seems to be a majority that are really questioning Harbaugh's benefit to the team, and I think at some point the owner's going to listen to that, and he's going to take that into account.
We could frame this into a bet somehow, but if I won't force you to stand on your own 25 and 60. I'll give you all the way up to 30 and 65. But we would set the wager in that manner, and I'll take either side of that bet when it occurs. Okay, that's what I'll tell you. We can discuss offline.
Okay.
Wager on this. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah.
Sounds good. Let's do are we ready for the next question? From
Flame Sorcerer.
Flame Sorcerer. Ken, I know this is about defense, but do you think the offensive skill positions are lacking compared to other teams who fancy themselves contenders?
They might be lacking relative to some teams who fancy themselves contenders but aren't, like the Bengals. So they're lacking in terms of that relative to some of the teams that have great receivers. Right now, the Ravens have a very messy situation, and it's largely based on the leg of Lamar Jackson. Is that his inability to provide the same misdirection completely has gutted the offense this year. And we're not blaming Lamar for this. It's just it is the way things are here in Baltimore. If Lamar is healthy, all things are right with the world, and he's improved every single running back he's played with. It's not a matter of there are exceptions or you can, that's not true. It's every single running back he's played with.
Definitely.
And beyond that, I mean, he's been an MVP level passer basically for his entire career. He's second now again in the all-time passer rating stat he dropped behind Rodgers again after these last 3 games, but he's still, as good as you could ever hope for in that category. I think basically that's the problem with the Ravens right now. And so you're not going to do better than Lamar Jackson at quarterback. So you got to hope for a healthy Lamar. When Lamar is healthy, you've got all the prospects in the world with this offense and, what they've been able to do with the defense over the years.
Yeah, I do not think they're short on weapons. My theory has always been you need 3 high-quality wide receivers. They have that with Bateman, Flowers, and DeAndre Hopkins, as well as Walker coming on. You have, a 1-2 punch with Derrick Henry and Keaton Mitchell. Keaton Mitchell, maybe his utilization could be upped. You have 3 tight ends who are all, going to probably make some money in free agency. The offensive line is probably the place you can look and say DeCosta should have brought in more competition at guard one way or another. I can't find a whole lot of fault with DeCosta's construction coming into this season. I thought they were the best roster in the league. I thought this was their year. You had the Matabike injury, which hurt. They could have had another safety, would have allowed Hamilton to come down earlier. But to me, it's not the weapons. Could you benefit from a 2 alpha wide receivers like Dallas has or like Cincinnati has or like Philly has? Yeah, but you don't necessarily need that. It's all part of how you're going to allocate your assets. And I think DeCosta did a pretty good job before this latest extension for Andrews.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I wouldn't find fault with that at all. And I hope this is another year the Ravens just trust themselves to make the right draft choices. It's not a year where they need to go crazy in free agency. And, they probably can. If they want to really push it, they could be more like the Eagles or more like the Browns because, hey, it might be either of those they end up being like if they spend heavily. But I think this is another year. Just lean into the draft, lean into the success at that. And if Lamar is back and healthy, all boats rise because of that. And your main focus when that's right is that your defense is of a championship caliber.
Yeah, I think the one piece I'd like to see them add is a top end pass rusher who can help them rush with 4 against ball out quick quarterbacks without having to use so much scheme and so much deception. That's what seems to kind of win games at the fourth quarter in the postseason. A lot of times somebody breaks out and has not just 2 sacks on the drive or something like that. But again, they've done a pretty good job at receiver. I don't want the receiving room to go down from here. I definitely still think you need to continue investing there. So how are you going to make that work? Are you going to go cheap at other positions, or are you going to dip into, future assets one way or another?
Just to address that for a second, they will have to make the fifth-year decision on Flowers. It seems like an obvious yes on that, given the year he's had so far. Any difference of opinion from you?
No, I think you do the 5th year, but I'm not sure you want to give him $30 million a year, 35. I think you want to keep that pipeline of drafting wide receivers. That's kind of the money ball approach I would take to that position. But you got to have 3. You can't say, well, we have Hollywood Brown and Willie Snead and Miles Boykin and Seth Roberts, so we're going to go win playoff games. That's not going to work in the NFL, I don't think, anymore.
Right. You're doing that with the benefit of hindsight. We all pretty much thought Miles Boykin was going to be a better player than he turned out to be. So it's
No, 2020 though, I was 100% draft a receiver, and they ended up picking Dobbins in the 2nd round instead, and they invested more in the running game instead of trying to prop up the pass game. I'm definitely on record for that back then.
all right. And I'm definitely on record for not liking the Queen pick in 2020. So we both got our score there. Okay, we got one more here. It's from Timothy Hancock. By the way, I have no idea if this question is real or not. It might be someone from trolling and trying to create trouble, but we're going to go through it anyway just to see if there's any validity in thinking about it. But doomsday scenario, but would it be reasonable for the Ravens to use a post-June 1 release on Lamar if he continues to regress and the team fails down the stretch? With the potentially massive turnover this upcoming free agency, why not an organizational reset? You want to go first?
I think that's ridiculous. You're not going to release Lamar. If anything, if they really said this is an untenable situation, they're going to trade him, and they're going to get a pretty good pick back. And the team that trades for him is going to eat his salary instead of you eating the guaranteed money. So I'm not opposed to a reset. I think they should have reset at least once since probably once every 8 years. I would be a proponent of a reset. I think that's kind of how you keep your roster and your salary cap healthy. But you releasing Lamar is not that would be giving up on an asset, selling short on an asset.
Right. Yeah. After this year, I don't think his value is going to be as high, unfortunately. And a healthy Lamar is just he remains the most dangerous player in the league as of right now. And we may be getting, unfortunately, a window into who Lamar is in his early to mid 30s and seeing a player with a little bit less elusiveness, less speed, and less ability to hopefully not less ability to read leverage, though, which is what's made Lamar great. I don't think that will change, but it may be that the connection between mind and muscle won't be quite as quick to
see agility. I think it's the agility is what's deteriorated this year. The agility, right. not the straight speed. I mean, he has maybe lost a little speed, but it's why some people said they missed the window and they're disappointed that they weren't able to cash in during his rookie contract. And here we are. So you got to keep plugging ahead, and starts this week with a rock fight against Pittsburgh on tap.
Right. Well, we are at this point, but when you're saying agility, you're saying that agility should be expected to return next year. With
I would say some of it, but it's not. He's not going to have the same exact agility as he ages into his 30s. If he's healthy, I mean, he looked pretty good against Buffalo, right? They had the big lead. He was running around, and then it's seemingly tapered off since then. So that's
with the injuries, yeah.
Right.
I'm going to make this point about this is that I've made the point many times that there's nobody in the history of football, or there's nobody any better at reading opposing leverage in the history of football. If you look at Lamar Jackson running through level 2, it's usually not even at full speed. He's already trying to line up his next missed tackle as he's doing that and figuring out how do I read the field and corner quickly to do what I'm doing. I don't think that is what he's going to lose here. I think since he relies so little on top speed that he won't need that. What I am concerned about, I will be interested to see, does he lose his ability somehow to translate what he's reading in terms of leverage? Muhammad Ali got older. Muhammad Ali is the only athlete who's in his class in terms of being. Muhammad Ali is a young boxer. You just couldn't hit the guy. He was unbelievable in terms of his ability to slip punches, and then that changed. And then he became more of a slower and eventually a rope-a-dope fighter who would take punch after punch after punch in hopes of tiring you out. It was a very different style, and I think Lamar, it might have to go through that kind of a transition where he becomes more of a passer and less of a runner entirely. I still think he's going to run some. I think a player like that, he'll run for one first down a game pretty much for his whole career, even if he plays till he's 40.
I mean, Tyrod Taylor is, what is he? He's 36 or so, and he's sitting there scrambled for a 15, 20-yard touchdown last week. And he's still playing pretty good. So, yeah, he's not going to – he might be 90% of what he was when he was in his prime, but that is going to ratchet up the need to continue to build a good roster around him and install the schemes that are going to allow you to because we do want Lamar to win a Super Bowl. I mean, even Steve Bisciotti's on record saying that I think he said that last offseason. So
that's like saying I want to win this. I want to win the Super Bowl for my son here. Everybody wants to win the Super Bowl. This organization wants to win the Super Bowl. There's no desire to not do that. It's just, how do you get there? And do you do it with a level approach, or do you do it with a spiky approach in terms of how you approach the things? This was the wrong year for an all-in, though, with Lamar hurt. It was the wrong year to do any kind of all-in strategy. Anyway.
Yeah. The league, I mean, the AFC is still wide open, right? Who are you scared of in the AFC right now, Ken? Who would you not want to play in the playoffs?
Well, no one, but I don't think they'd be favored against pretty much anyone in the playoffs is the problem right now. I said, I don't think am I scared of Kansas City? Well, not in the sense that we've been scared of them in the past, or a Buffalo. No, not in the same sense. Do I think that even Denver or New England playing at home against the Ravens might be favored? Yeah, sure. I think they might be the better football teams this year. That's what really sucks about this situation.
Yeah.
Is that the bar has been lowered across the league, and yet the Ravens aren't above it. So.
Yeah, I've heard several people make the point, if the Ravens had their 2023 or 2024 team this season, they'd be far and away the favorite. So unlucky, but not over yet.
All right. Well, Vas, always great talking football with you. Tell folks where they can start up a conversation with you online.
Yeah, I'm at Vasilis Fiamata on Twitter X, VASILIS FIAMATA.
All right. Outstanding. Other folks out there, thanks for all your contributions to Film Study Mailbag. Please keep that up. Use hashtag Film Study Mailbag. I'll either respond to them in a 1 to 3 minute video, which I've been enjoying doing, and Maureen has really been pushing me to do more of those. And otherwise, we'll bring them on this show or on the offense show, the defense show, whatever I think is most appropriate for the time needed for that question. For Vas Laricos, this is Ken McKusick saying goodbye. We'll talk to you next week on Friday Morning GM.